The barbed wire cut deep into Elena's palm as she twisted it around the fence post. But she didn't stop. Blood mixed with dirt and sweat, staining the steel crimson as she worked through the scorching Arizona heat. Her father's ranch was been dying for months. Sand, she was the only one left to save it. Mia, you need to rest. Her mother had pleaded that morning, but Elena couldn't rest. Not when the bank notices kept coming. Not when the cattle were getting out through broken fences. Not when every sunrise brought them closer to losing everything her family had built over 3 generations. The tool slipped from her bloodied grip, clattering to the ground. Elena cursed under her breath, wiping her hands on her already stained jeans. The fence stretched endlessly before her, a monument to everything falling apart. She bent to retrieve the wire cutters, her vision blurring from exhaustion and dehydration. That's enough. The voice came from behind her, deep and commanding. Elena spun around, nearly losing her balance. A man stood 20 feet away, his silhouette imposing against the setting sun. He wore a weathered Stetson and boots that had seen decades of hard work, his broad shoulders filling out a faded denim shirt. "Excuse me." Elena straightened, instinctively hiding her bleeding hands behind her back. "This is private property." He stepped closer, and she could see his face clearly now. Sharp jawline, eyes the color of storm clouds, and a mouth set in a line that suggested he wasn't used to being argued with. "I know exactly where I am, Elena Vasquez." Her heart skipped. How did he know her name? "I'm Jake Morrison," he continued, removing his hat to reveal dark hair touched with silver at the temples. "I owned the Double M Ranch, 5 miles north of here." Elena's blood ran cold. Morrison, the name that had haunted her family's conversations for weeks. The rancher who'd been buying up struggling properties throughout the valley. The one her father had called a vulture in expensive boots. "If you're here to make an offer, you're wasting your time," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "This ranch isn't for sale." Jake's eyes dropped to her hands, now visible at her sides, blood still seeping from fresh cuts. Something flickered across his face: concern, anger. "You're going to pass out if you keep this up." "I'm fine." "You're not fine." He stepped closer, close enough that she could smell leather and something distinctly masculine. "When's the last time you ate, slept, took a drink of water?" Elena opened her mouth to lie, but her body betrayed her. Her knees buckled, and she would have hit the ground if Jake hadn't caught her, his strong arms wrapping around her waist. "Let me go," she whispered, but the words came out breathless. "Not a chance." His voice was rough, almost tender. "You're coming with me. I can single quotes T. We'll still be broken tomorrow." Jake lifted her effortlessly, carrying her toward a truck she hadn't noticed before. "But you might not be alive to fix it if you don't get some help." As he placed her gently in the passenger seat, Elena realized she was too weak to fight. The last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Jake's concerned face, and the last thing she felt was his calloused hand brushing hair from her forehead with unexpected gentleness. Elena woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, her head pounding like a bass drum. She was lying on a leather couch in a room she didn't recognize, sunlight streaming through windows that looked out onto rolling hills dotted with cattle. "You're awake." She turned to find Jake standing in the doorway, a steaming mug in his hands. He'd changed into a clean shirt, and without his hat, she could see the concern etched in the lines around his eyes. "Where am I?" She tried to sit up, immediately regretting it as the room spun. "My house." He crossed the room, setting the mug on the coffee table beside her. "You've been unconscious for 14 hours. 14 hours. Elena bolted upright, ignoring the dizziness. "I have to get back. The cattle are fine. I sent 2 of my men to check on them this morning." Jake's hand on her shoulder was firm but gentle, pressing her back down. "Drink the coffee. Eat something. Then we'll talk." Don't want to talk to you." But even as she said it, Elena reached for the mug, her body betraying her with its desperate need for caffeine and warmth. Jake settled into the chair across from her, his long legs stretched out. "Your father called me yesterday." Elena nearly choked on her coffee. "What?" "He asked me to check on you. Said you'd been working yourself to death trying to save a ranch that's already lost." The words hit her like a physical blow. He had no right. He had every right. "You're his daughter, and you're killing yourself." Jake leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Elena, I've seen the books. The bank showed them to me when they put the property on the market." "On the market?" The mug slipped from her numb fingers, coffee spilling across the hardwood floor. 6 months ago, your father tried to get a loan extension, but... Double quotes. Jake shook his head. "I'm sorry. I thought you knew." Elena stared at him, the world tilting off. It's Axis. 6 months. Her father had been lying to her for 6 months, letting her believe that her backbreaking work meant something, that she could somehow save what was already lost. Why? The word came out as a whisper. Because he loves you. Because he knows you'd never stop fighting, even when the fight is over. Jake stood and walked to the window, his back to her. He asked me to buy it, to keep it in one piece, instead of letting the developers tear it apart. And you said yes. The bitterness in her voice could have stripped paint. Of course you did. Another struggling ranch to add to your empire. Jake turned, and she was surprised to see something that looked like hurt in his eyes. I said yes, because I couldn't stand the thought of you working yourself to death for nothing. How noble of you. Damn it, Alina. Jake crossed the room in 3 strides, his hands gripping the arms of the couch as he leaned over her. I said yes, because I've been watching you from across that fence for 2 months, and I can't get you out of my head. The confession hung between them, raw and unexpected. Alina found herself staring into his storm-gray eyes, seeing something there that made her heart race. You don't even know me, she whispered. I know you work until your hands bleed. I know you'd sacrifice everything. For your family? I know you're the strongest woman I've ever met. His voice was rough, intimate. And I know I'm falling for you, even though you hate everything I represent. Elena's breath caught. Jake, ... I bought your ranch, he said softly. But I'm not taking it from you. I'm giving it back. What the deed will be in your name. The mortgage will be manageable. And you'll have all the help you need to make it profitable again. He straightened, stepping back. No strings attached. Alina shook her head, trying to process what he was saying. I can't accept charity. It's not charity. It's an investment. Jake smiled, the expression transforming his face. In you, Alina stared at Jake, certain she'd misheard him. You want to give me my ranch back? Not give, sell. For a price you can afford. Jake moved to the window again, his shoulders tense. I've done the math. With proper management and some initial investment, the Vasquez ranch could be profitable within 2 years. And what do you get out of it? Elena's voice was sharp with suspicion. Men like Jake Morrison didn't make deals out of the goodness of their hearts. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Peace of mind. That's not an answer. Jake turned back to her, and she saw something vulnerable in his expression before he masked it. I grew up on a ranch like yours. Small, family-owned, passed down through generations. My father lost it when I was 16. Elena felt her anger begin to crack. What happened? Drought. Bad investments. Pride. Jake's jaw tightened. My father was too stubborn to ask for help. Too proud to accept it when it was offered. He worked himself into an early grave, trying to save something that was already gone. The parallel wasn't lost on Alina. She saw herself in his story, saw her own father's stubborn pride and her own desperate determination. I swore I'd never let that happen to another family if I could prevent it. Jake continued. I've made offers to 12 ranchers in this valley over the past 5 years. Not one of them has taken me up on it. Because they don't trust you. Because they think I'm trying to steal their land. Jake's smile was rueful. Which, I suppose, is exactly what it looks like. Alina studied his face, looking for signs of deception. Why should I believe you? Because I'm going to prove it. Jake walked to a desk in the corner and pulled out a thick folder. These are the contracts for the Vasquez ranch. The purchase price is what your father owes the bank, plus legal fees. The sale price to you is half that amount, with a 30-year mortgage at 2% interest. Elena's mouth fell open. 2%. That's impossible. I'm not doing this to make money, Alina. I'm doing it because... He stopped, running a hand through his hair. Because I can't stand watching you destroy yourself. You barely know me. I know enough. Jake sat on the edge of the coffee table, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his gray eyes. I know you were up at dawn every day, for the past 2 months, working on that fence. I know you haven't taken a day off since your father got sick. I know you cry when you think nobody's watching. Elena's cheeks burned. You've been spying on me. Our properties share a fence line. I couldn't help but notice. Jake's voice gentled. Elena, you're 26 years old. You should be living your life, not sacrificing it for a lost cause. It's not a lost cause, she said fiercely. It's my family's legacy. Then let me help you save it. Jake reached out, his fingers brushing her bandaged hands. The right way. With proper equipment, enough workers, and a realistic timeline. Elena looked down at their joined hands, surprised by how right it felt. What's the catch? No catch, just conditions. Such as you take care of yourself. You eat 3 meals a day. You sleep at least 6 hours a night. You take Sundays off. Jake's thumb traced over her knuckles. And you let me help. Why would you want to help? Jake was quiet for so long that Alina thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I'm tired of being alone. Because I've been successful at everything, except the things that matter. Because when I saw you collapse yesterday, I realized I'd rather spend the rest of my life watching you succeed than watching you fail. The honesty in his words took Elena's breath away. Jake, I'm not asking you to marry me, Elena. I'm not even asking you to like me. I'm just asking you to let me invest in something worthwhile for once in my life. Elena pulled her hands free, needing space to think. I need to see the contracts. Of course. Jake stood, giving her room to breathe. Take all the time you need. But Elena, yes. Promise me you won't go back to working yourself to death while you're deciding. Promise me you'll take care of yourself. Elena met his eyes, seeing the genuine concern there. I promise. As Jake left the room, Elena realized she was already halfway to trusting him. The question was whether she was brave enough to let herself fall the rest of the way. 3 days later, Elena stood in her father's kitchen, the contracts spread across the worn wooden table. Her parents sat across from her, their weathered faces etched with worry and hope in equal measure. Mia, you don't have to do this, her mother said softly. We can find another way. What other way, Mama? Elena's voice was gentle but firm. The bank is foreclosing next month. This is our only option. Her father, Carlos, cleared his throat. I should have told you sooner about the sale. I thought, I hoped, He shook his head. I'm sorry, Elena. I failed you. Elena reached across the table, covering his gnarled hand with hers. You didn't fail anyone, Papa. You tried to protect me, and now you're trusting a stranger with our family's future. Jake Morrison isn't a stranger anymore. Elena had spent the past 3 days learning everything she could about the man who'd offered to save her ranch. What she'd found had surprised her. Did you know he's put 4 families back on ranches they'd lost? Did you know he's never foreclosed on a single property? Did you know he anonymously donated $1 million to the local school district last year? Her parents exchanged glances. How do you know all this? Her mother asked. I asked around. Talked to people who've worked with him. Elena smiled. Sarah Rodriguez from the feed store said he's the most honest man she's ever done business with. Tom Anderson said Jake saved his ranch when everyone else had given up on him. And what does he want in return? Carlos asked. Elena hesitated. The contracts were exactly what Jake had promised, fair, generous, and surprisingly simple. But she sensed there was more to his offer than financial investment. He wants to be involved in the operations, she said finally. Not as an owner, but as a partner. He has resources, equipment, workers, expertise that we need, and you trust him. Elena thought about the past 3 days. Jake had called every evening to check on her, had sent over food when he learned she was too busy reading contracts to cook, had answered every question she'd had about the arrangement without impatience or condescension. I'm starting to, she admitted. The sound of tires on gravel interrupted their conversation. Elena looked out the window to see Jake's truck pulling into the driveway. He's here, she said, her heart suddenly racing. Elena. Her father's voice stopped her as she moved toward the door. Are you sure about this? She turned back, seeing the fear in his eyes. I'm sure about saving the ranch, Papa. Everything else, we'll figure out as we go. Jake knocked on the door, his hat in his hands. Elena opened it to find him looking uncharacteristically nervous. I came to see if you'd made a decision, he said. I have. Elena stepped aside, letting him enter. Want to accept your offer? Relief flooded Jake's features. Thank you, but I have conditions of my own. Jake's eyebrows rose. I'm listening. I want a full partnership, not just financially, but operationally. I want to be involved in every decision, every plan, every investment. Elena crossed her arms. This is still my family's ranch, and I won't be a silent partner. Agreed. I want monthly reports on all finances. Complete transparency, of course. And I want the right to buy you out completely, if the ranch becomes profitable enough to support the full mortgage. Jake smiled. I wouldn't expect anything less. Elena studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. You're agreeing to all of this very easily. Because I meant what I said. I'm not trying to take advantage of you, Elena. I'm trying to help you succeed. Why? The question had been haunting her for days. Why me? Why this ranch? Jake was quiet. For a moment, his gaze moving from Elena to her parents and back again. Because you remind me of what I used to believe in, before I got so focused on building an empire, that I forgot why I started ranching in the first place. And what's that? Family legacy. The belief that some things are worth fighting for. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. You've been fighting for those things alone for too long. I'd like to fight for them with you. Alina felt her walls crumbling. Jake, ... Double quotes, I know you don't trust me completely yet. I know you think I might have ulterior motives, but I swear to you, on my father's grave, that I will never do anything to hurt you or your family. Alina looked at her parents, seeing the hope beginning to bloom in their eyes. She thought about the past months of backbreaking work, of watching her father's spirit break a little more each day, of lying awake at night, wondering if she was strong enough to save what mattered most. Okay, she said finally. Partners. Jake's smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. Partners. As they shook hands, Alina felt something shift inside her chest. She was still afraid, still uncertain about Jake's true motivations. But, for the first time in months, she felt hope. 6 weeks after signing the partnership agreement, Alina barely recognized her own ranch. Where once there had been broken fences and dying cattle, now there were sturdy enclosures and healthy livestock. The old barn had been repaired and expanded, and new equipment gleamed in the morning sun. But the most dramatic change was in Alina herself. You're humming, Jake observed, coming up behind her as she checked the water levels in the cattle troughs. Alina turned, surprised by how her pulse quickened at the sight of him. He was covered in dust and sweat from helping repair the windmill, his shirt clinging to his broad chest in ways that made her forget what she was supposed to be doing. I wasn't humming, she protested. You were definitely humming. Jake's grin was infectious. Some old Mexican song your mother taught you, I'd guess. Alina felt her cheeks warm. How would you know what my mother taught me? Because she's been teaching it to me too. Jake's expression grew tender. Along with her recipe for tamales and the proper way to braid rope, it was true. Over the past month and a half, Jake had become a fixture, not just on the ranch, but in Alina's family. He showed up for Sunday dinners, helped her father with physical therapy exercises, and listened to her mother's stories about the old days with genuine interest. She likes you, Alina said softly. The feeling is mutual. Jake moved closer, close enough that she could see the silver flecks in his eyes. Your whole family has made me feel more welcome than I've felt anywhere in years. Alina's heart clenched. She'd learned more about Jake's past in recent weeks, how he'd built his empire through sheer determination and ruthless business sense. How he'd never married because he'd never found a woman who could see past his money to the man beneath it. How he'd been essentially alone since his father's death 20 years ago. Jake, she began, but he cut her off. I know what you're going to say. He stepped back, his expression becoming carefully neutral. I'm getting too involved. Becoming too much a part of your family's life. No, that's not. I can pull back. Keep things strictly professional. I never meant to overstep. Alina caught his arm as he started to turn away. Jake, stop. He froze, his muscles tense under her touch. I was going to say that I'm glad you're here, that I can't imagine doing this without you anymore. Alina's voice was barely above a whisper. That scares me. Jake turned back to her, hope flickering in his eyes. Why does it scare you? Because I swore I'd never depend on anyone again. After my last relationship ended, after I realized I was just another conquest to someone I thought cared about me. ... Alina shook her head. I decided it was safer to handle everything alone. What happened? Jake's voice was gentle. David Martinez. I thought he loved me, but he was just using me to get information about my father's land deals. He was working for a development company that wanted to buy out all the small ranchers in the valley. Alina's laugh was bitter. I was so naive. I actually thought he wanted to build a life with me. Jake's jaw tightened. He was an idiot. Or I was, for believing him. Alina, look at me. Jake's hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. What David did to you was wrong. But not every man is David. I'm not David. I know that. Logically, I know that. Alina's voice broke. But my heart, I'm terrified of making the same mistake again. What if you don't have to make any decisions right now? Jake's thumbs brushed away tears. She didn't realize she was crying. What if we just take it one day at a time? Alina searched his face, seeing nothing but sincerity. You'd be okay with that? With not knowing where this is going? Alina, I've been alone for most of my adult life. I've built everything I own with my own hands, and I've never had anyone to share it with. Jake's voice was rough with emotion. Whatever this is between us, however long it lasts, It's more than I ever expected to have. Alina felt something inside her chest crack open. Jake. I'm not asking you to trust me completely. I'm not asking you to love me. I'm just asking you to let me be here, for as long as you'll have me. Before she could second-guess herself, Alina rose on her tiptoes and pressed her lips to his. Jake went still for a heartbeat. Then his arms came around her, pulling her close. As he deepened the kiss, when they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. One day at a time, Alina whispered against his lips. One day at a time, Jake agreed, as they stood there in the warm afternoon sun. Alina felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the possibility of happiness. For the first time since David's betrayal, she allowed herself to imagine a future that included someone else. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and perfect all at once. The first storm came in October, sweeping across the valley with a ferocity that took everyone by surprise. Alina stood at the kitchen window, watching the rain lash against the glass, while wind howled through the trees. The cattle in the south pasture, she said suddenly, grabbing her rain jacket. They're not going to have shelter from this. Jake looked up from the weather report on his phone. I'll get them. You stay here. Like hell I will. Alina was already pulling on her boots. It's my ranch, Jake. Those are my cattle. Alina, this isn't safe. Neither is letting 100 head of cattle get swept away by flash floods. Alina headed for the door. Are you coming or not? Jake cursed under his breath, but followed her out into the storm. The wind hit them like a physical blow, driving rain so hard it stung their faces. Alina had to shout to be heard over the roar of the storm. We need to get them to the barn. They fought their way to the truck, water already ankle-deep in the yard. Jake drove while Alina peered through the rain-streaked windshield, trying to spot the cattle through the sheets of water. There, Alina pointed to a cluster of dark shapes huddled against the fence. By the creek, Jake's face went pale. Alina, that creek's going to flood. We need to get them out of there now. They jumped out of the truck and immediately sank to their knees in mud. The cattle were panicked, milling around in confusion, as the creek behind them rose steadily. Take the left side, Alina shouted. I'll take the right. For the next hour, they fought to move the cattle to higher ground. Elena's horse, Estrella, proved invaluable, cutting through the herd with practiced ease, while Elena guided the frightened animals towards safety. But as they moved, the last group of cattle, disaster struck. A massive wall of water came rushing down the creek, carrying debris and foam. Elena saw it coming and spurred Estrella forward, but the horse slipped in the mud. Elena hit the ground hard, the breath knocked out of her. She looked up to see the flood racing toward her, and for a moment, she was certain she was going to die. Then Jake was there, hauling her to her feet and half carrying her to higher ground as the water swept past, where she'd been lying just seconds before. Are you hurt? Jake's hands moved over her frantically, checking for injuries. I'm fine, Elena gasped, but she was shaking uncontrollably. The cattle are safe. All of them. Jake pulled her against his chest, his arms tight around her. Christ, Elena, I thought I'd lost you. Elena clung to him, feeling the terror of the past hour finally hit her. I'm okay. We're okay. But they weren't okay. As dawn broke and the storm passed, the full extent of the damage became clear. The south pasture was destroyed, fences torn down, and equipment scattered. The creek had changed course, cutting a new channel through what had been their best grazing land. How much? Elena asked Jake as they surveyed the damage. To fix all of this, Jake's face was grim. More than we budgeted for. A lot more. Elena felt her heart sink. Enough to bankrupt us. Not if we're smart about it. But it's going to mean taking on more debt and pushing back our timeline for profitability by at least a year. Elena stared at the devastation, feeling the weight of responsibility crushing down on her. Maybe we should just sell. Cut our losses before. No. Jake's voice was sharp. Elena, look at me. She turned to face him, seeing determination burning in his eyes. We're not giving up. Not after everything we've built here. Not after what we've found together. Jake, be realistic. This could ruin us both. Then we'll be ruined together. Jake took her hands in his. Elena, I meant what I said. About fighting for what matters. This ranch matters. Your family matters. You matter. Elena felt tears threatening again. I'm scared, Jake. I'm scared of losing everything again. I know, but you're not alone this time. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. Elena looked around at the damaged land, then back at Jake's determined face. Together. Together, Jake confirmed. Partners, remember. Elena managed a shaky smile. Partners, As they stood in the wreckage of the storm, Alina realized that something fundamental had changed between them. This wasn't just about the ranch anymore, or even about proving they could succeed. This was about the life they were building together, one day at a time. The storm had destroyed their land, but it had also washed away the last of Elena's defenses. She was falling in love with Jake Morrison, and for the first time in her life, that didn't terrify her. It gave her hope. The insurance adjuster left on a Tuesday, and Alina knew from Jake's expression that the news wasn't good. They sat in her father's kitchen. The assessment report spread between them like a death sentence. 30%, Jake said quietly. That's what they're covering. Alina stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of them. 30% of what we need to rebuild. Guess so we're looking at what? 200,000 out of pocket. Jake nodded. Maybe more, depending on what else we find as we start repairs. Alina pushed back from the table, walking to the window. Outside, her father was sitting on the porch, staring at the damaged land, with defeat written in every line of his body. I should have known, she said bitterly. I should have known it was too good to be true. Alina, no, Jake. This is reality. This is what happens when people like us try to play in the big leagues. Alina turned back to him, her eyes blazing. You should cut your losses and walk away. Find another family to play savior to. Jake stood slowly, his face carefully controlled. Is that what you think I'm doing? Playing savior, aren't you? Elena's voice was sharp with hurt and frustration. Riding in on your white horse to rescue the poor little Mexican family who can't manage their own ranch. That's not then, what is it, Jake? Because I've been racking my brain trying to figure out why a man like you would tie himself to a disaster like this. Elena's composure cracked. Why would you risk everything for people you barely know? Jake was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. Because I love you. The words hit Alina like a physical blow. She stared at him, her heart racing. I love you, Jake repeated, stepping closer. I love your strength, your determination, your loyalty to your family. I love the way you hum when you think no one's listening, and the way you cry when you think no one's watching. I love that you'd rather work yourself to death than give up on something you believe in. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Jake, ... I know it's too soon. I know you're not ready to hear it. But I won't let you think that this is about charity, or pity, or some white savior complex. Jake's voice was fierce. This is about love, Alina, pure and simple. You barely know me. I know enough. Jake reached out, cupping her face in his hands. I know you take your coffee black because you think adding cream is wasteful. I know you sing off-key when you're happy and you bite your lip when you're concentrating. I know you'd give up everything for your family, and that you've never believed you deserve to be loved just for who you are. Elena's breath caught. Jake, ... I know you're scared. I know you've been hurt before, and you think I'm going to leave when things get tough. Jake's thumb brushed away a tear. But I'm not going anywhere, Alina. Storm or no storm, debt or no debt, I'm staying right here. The ranch might fail, Alina whispered. Then we'll fail together. You could lose everything. I already lost everything once. The difference is, this time I have something worth fighting for. Alina stared into his eyes, seeing the truth there. You really mean it, every word. Alina felt the last of her walls crumble. I love you too, she whispered. I've been fighting it for weeks, but I love you too. Jake's smile was radiant. Thank God. He kissed her then, pouring all his love and determination into the connection between them. Alina kissed him back, letting herself believe for the first time that maybe, just maybe, they could have it all. When they finally broke apart, Jake rested his forehead against hers. We'll figure this out, he said. The storm damage, the insurance, all of it. We'll find a way. How can you be so sure? Because I've got the strongest woman in Arizona as my partner, Jake said. And because we're not just fighting for a ranch anymore. We're fighting for our future. Alina smiled through her tears. Our future, Jake confirmed. And I'll be damned if I let anything stand in the way of that. As they held each other in the damaged kitchen, Alina felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Absolute certainty. Not about the ranch, or the money, or even what tomorrow would bring, but about the man in her arms, and the love they'd found in the midst of chaos. Whatever came next, they would face it together, and that was enough. The letter arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered by a courier, who looked uncomfortable with his task. Alina read it twice before the words sank in. What is it? Jake asked, looking up from his laptop where he'd been researching flood restoration techniques. We're being sued. Elena's voice was hollow. By the Whitmore Development Company. Jake went very still. For what? They claim we've been using their water rights. That the creek we've been drawing from for irrigation actually belongs to them. Elena looked up at Jake, seeing her own shock reflected in his eyes. They want damages of $500,000. Jake stood abruptly, pacing to the window. This is about the storm damage. They're trying to force us out while we're vulnerable. How could they claim water rights to a creek that's been on this land for decades? Because water rights are complicated. In Arizona, and they know we can't afford to fight a lengthy legal battle. Jake turned back to her, his face grim. Elena, this isn't a coincidence. Someone's been watching us, waiting for the right moment to strike. Elena felt sick. Do you think they caused the storm damage somehow? No, but they're definitely taking advantage of it. Jake ran a hand through his hair. We need a lawyer. A good one. With what money? Elena's laugh was bitter. We're already stretched thin from the repairs. We can't afford to fight a development company with unlimited resources. Then we'll find another way. There is no other way, Jake. Elena stood, moving to the window. They've got us. They know we're broke. They know we're desperate. And they're going to squeeze until we have no choice but to sell. I won't let that happen. Jake, be realistic. We're talking about $500,000 in damages, plus legal fees that could bankrupt us both. Elena's voice cracked. Maybe it's time to admit we're beaten. No. Jake's voice was steel. Elena, look at me. She turned reluctantly, seeing the fierce determination in his eyes. I've been researching the Whitmore Development Company since we got that letter. They've done this before. Targeted struggling ranchers with frivolous lawsuits, knowing the owners can't afford to fight back. Jake moved closer. But they made one mistake. What's that? They picked the wrong rancher to mess with. Jake's smile was predatory. I may not be the richest man in Arizona, but I've got enough resources to make this fight very expensive for them. Elena shook her head. I won't let you throw away your fortune on a legal battle that might not even be winnable. It's not your choice to make. The hell it isn't. This is my ranch, my family's legacy, and you're the woman I love. Jake's voice cut through her protests. Which means your fight is my fight. Your family is my family. Your future is my future. Elena stared at him, seeing the absolute conviction in his face. Jake, this could destroy you financially. Then, I'll be destroyed fighting for something that matters. Instead of sitting in my big empty house, counting money I don't need. Before Elena could respond, her father appeared in the doorway. Carlos looked older than his 65 years, his face etched with worry. Mia, I heard voices. Is everything all right? Elena and Jake exchanged glances. Papa, we need to talk to you about something. Carlos listened in silence as Elena explained the lawsuit, his face growing graver with each word. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. This is my fault, he said finally. I should have been more careful with the water rights documentation. This isn't your fault. Papa. Elena knelt beside his chair. This is corporate greed, pure and simple. But if I had been more thorough, if I had kept better records. Carlos. Jake's voice was gentle but firm. I've seen this before. They would have found something else to use against us. This is about forcing us out, not about water rights. Carlos looked at Jake with tired eyes. What do? We fight. Jake said simply. We get the best lawyer money can buy, and we fight. And if we lose, Jake was quiet for a moment. Then we lose together, as a family. But we don't go down without a fight. Carlos studied Jake's face, then slowly nodded. You're a good man, Jake Morrison. Better than this family deserves. You're wrong, Jake said quietly. This family deserves everything good that life has to offer. And I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure you get it. As Elena watched the two men, who meant everything to her, she felt a surge of love so strong it took her breath away. Jake wasn't just fighting for the ranch, he was fighting for her family's honor. For their right to exist in a world that seemed determined to crush people like them. Okay, she said finally. We fight. Jake's smile was brilliant. We fight. But, even as they made their plans, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. The Whitmore Development Company had resources they couldn't match, and they'd picked this fight for a reason. The question was, would love and determination be enough to overcome corporate greed and unlimited legal resources? Only time would tell. The lawyer Jake hired was a sharp-eyed woman named Maria Santos, who specialized in agricultural water rights and had a reputation for taking on big corporations. She sat across from Elena and Jake in her downtown office, The Whitmore lawsuit spread across her desk. "They're good," Maria said bluntly. Whoever researched this case knew exactly what they were doing. Elena's heart sank. "So, we don't have a case." "I didn't say that." Maria leaned back in her chair. "What I said was that they're good. But good doesn't mean right." Jake leaned forward. "What do you mean?" "The water rights they're claiming date back to 1923. The problem is, your family's been using that creek since 1918. And I found the original documentation in the county records." Maria smiled. "It was misfiled, which is why Whitmore's lawyers didn't find it." Elena felt a surge of hope. "So we can fight this." "We can fight it. The question is whether we can win it." Maria's expression grew serious. "Whitmore has deep pockets and a team of lawyers. They're going to drag this out as long as possible, hoping you'll run out of money and settle." "How long are we talking?" Jake asked. "Could be 2 years, maybe more." Maria shrugged. "That's a lot of legal fees, even with me taking the case on contingency." Elena felt her hope crumbling. "We can't afford to be tied up in court for 2 years. Actually, you might not have to be." Maria pulled out another folder. "I've been doing some research on Whitmore Development. They've filed similar lawsuits against 6 other ranchers in the past 3 years. All of them settled out of court. So that suggests they don't actually want to go to trial. They're counting on intimidation tactics to force settlements." Maria's eyes glinted. "But what if we could turn their own tactics against them?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "How?" "By organizing the other ranchers. If we can get all 6 families to join our case, we can file a class action lawsuit, claiming harassment and conspiracy to commit fraud." Maria's smile was predatory. Suddenly, Whitmore's the one facing a lengthy, expensive legal battle. Elena felt a spark of excitement. "Would that work?" "It's risky. If we lose, everyone loses. But if we win," Maria shrugged, "we could not only stop the lawsuits, but also recover damages for all the families they've targeted." Jake was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "I like it. But we need to convince the other ranchers to join us." "That's where you come in," Maria said. "I can't ethically contact them, but you can. You need to convince them that standing together is their best chance of survival." Elena looked at Jake, seeing the determination in his eyes. "It's a big risk." "Everything worthwhile is a risk," Jake replied. "The question is, are you willing to take it?" Elena thought about her father's tired face, her mother's worried hands, the ranch that had been in her family for generations. Then she thought about Jake's unwavering support, his willingness to risk everything for her family. "I'm in," she said firmly. The next week was a whirlwind of activity. Elena and Jake drove from ranch to ranch, meeting with families who'd been targeted by Whitmore's lawsuits. The stories were heartbreakingly similar. Small ranchers faced with financial ruin, families torn apart by legal battles they couldn't afford to fight. But convincing them to join the class action suit was harder than Elena had expected. "I can't afford to make this worse," said Tom Anderson, whose ranch bordered Elena's property. "I've got grandchildren to think about." "This is exactly how we make it better," Elena argued. "Tom, if we let them pick us off one by one, we all lose. But if we stand together, we all go down together." Tom's wife, Betty, interrupted. "I'm sorry, Elena, but we can't take that risk." It was the same story at every ranch. Fear had taken hold of these families, and they were too scared to fight back. "Maybe we should just focus on our own case," Elena said despondently as they drove away from the Martinez ranch. Their 4th rejection of the day. "No," Jake said firmly. "Elena, these families are counting on us, even if they don't know it. Yet, if we don't stop Whitmore now, they'll keep doing this until every small ranch in the valley is gone. But how do we convince them to trust us?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "By giving them something they can't refuse." "What?" "A guarantee. I'll personally cover any legal fees if the case goes badly. Every family gets their money back, plus enough to relocate if necessary." Elena stared at him. "Jake, that could be millions of dollars." "Then it's a good thing I have millions of dollars. You'd risk everything for people you barely know." Jake stopped the truck and turned to face her. "Elena, I told you before, I've spent my whole life building wealth I didn't need. This is my chance to use it for something that matters." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. I love you too." Jake reached over and took her hand. "So, are you ready to save some ranches?" Elena squeezed his hand, feeling the last of her doubts fade away. "Let's do it." Within a week, they had all 6 families on board. The class action lawsuit was filed, and suddenly, the Whitmore Development Company found themselves facing a very different kind of fight than they'd expected. The war was just beginning. The courtroom was packed as Judge Patricia Hernandez called the case to order. Alina sat between Jake and Maria Santos, her hands clenched in her lap as she watched the Whitmore legal team take their seats across the aisle. "This is it," Maria whispered. 6 months of preparation comes down to the next few hours. Alina nodded, unable to speak. The past half year had been a roller coaster of depositions, motions, and legal maneuvering. But through it all, Jake had been her rock, never wavering in his support, even when the legal bills climbed into the hundreds of thousands. "The prosecution may call their first witness," Judge Hernandez announced as Maria stood gracefully. "Your Honor, we call Elena Vasquez to the stand." Elena's legs felt like jelly as she walked to the witness box. She'd practiced her testimony dozens of times. But facing the packed courtroom filled with ranchers, reporters, and Whitmore executives made her mouth go dry. "Ms. Vasquez," Maria began, "can you tell the court how long your family has owned the Vasquez Ranch?" "Since 1918, Elena replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "My great-grandfather, Miguel Vasquez, bought the land and built the original homestead. And in all that time, has your family ever had their water rights disputed?" "No, never. We've been using the creek for irrigation for over a century." "Then what happened in October of last year?" Elena took a deep breath. "We received a letter from Whitmore Development claiming we were using their water illegally. They demanded $500,000 in damages." "How did this letter make you feel?" "Terrified," Elena said honestly. "We'd just suffered flood damage from a major storm. We were already struggling financially, and this lawsuit threatened to destroy everything my family had built." Maria led Elena through the entire ordeal: the storm damage, the insurance problems, the desperate attempts to find a legal solution. Elena spoke about sleepless nights, about watching her father's health decline under the stress, about the fear that they would lose everything. "And then what happened?" Maria asked. Elena looked at Jake, drawing strength from his encouraging smile. "My partner, Jake Morrison, hired you to represent us, and we discovered that Whitmore had been targeting struggling ranches across the valley with similar lawsuits." "Objection," called out Whitmore's lead attorney. "Relevance. I'll allow it," Judge Hernandez said. "The witness may continue." Elena described how they'd organized the other ranchers, how they'd uncovered the pattern of harassment, how they'd decided to fight back as a united front. "Ms. Vasquez," Maria said finally, "what do you want from this court?" Elena straightened in her chair. "Justice, for my family, for all the families Whitmore has targeted, and for every small rancher who's been told they don't have the right to fight back against corporate bullies." When Elena returned to her seat, Jake squeezed her hand. "You are perfect," he whispered. The trial continued for 3 days. Expert witnesses testified about water rights, legal precedents, and agricultural history. The other ranchers told their stories, painting a picture of systematic harassment and intimidation. But the most damaging testimony came from a former Whitmore employee who'd quit in disgust over the company's tactics. The strategy was simple, Robert Chen testified. Target ranches that were already struggling financially. File lawsuits that would be too expensive to fight. Most families would settle out of court rather than risk bankruptcy. And if they didn't settle, Maria asked, then we'd drag the case out until they ran out of money. We had a whole department dedicated to what we called land acquisition through litigation. Elena watched the jury's faces as Chen described the company's predatory practices. She saw disgust, anger, and something that looked like determination. Which defense was predictable. They claimed they were simply protecting their legitimate water rights. But Maria systematically demolished their arguments, showing how the company had manipulated records, intimidated witnesses, and used their vast resources to crush families who couldn't fight back. "This isn't about water rights," Maria said in her closing argument. "This is about corporate greed and the systematic destruction of a way of life that's been part of this valley for generations." She gestured to Elena and the other ranchers. "These families aren't asking for charity. They're asking for the right to exist, to work their land, to pass on their legacy to their children. They're asking for justice." The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Hernandez asked. The foreman stood. "We have, Your Honor. On the charge of harassment, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. On the charge of conspiracy to commit fraud, we find in favor of the plaintiffs. On the charge of intentional infliction of emotional distress, we find in favor of the plaintiffs." Elena felt Jake's arm around her shoulders as the courtroom erupted in cheers. "Furthermore, The foreman continued, "We award damages in the amount of $2.5 million to be divided among the plaintiff families." Alina couldn't breathe. $2.5 million meant not just victory, but financial security for all the families involved. And, the foreman added, "We recommend that the district attorney investigate Whitmore Development Company for possible criminal charges." As the gavel fell, Alina found herself swept up in Jake's arms, tears streaming down her face. Around them, the other ranchers were crying, laughing, embracing each other in joy and relief. "We did it," Jake whispered in her ear. "We actually did it. We did it," Alina repeated, hardly believing it was true. 6 months later, Alina stood in the same spot where she'd first collapsed from exhaustion, where Jake had taken the tools from her bleeding hands and changed her life forever. The ranch was thriving, now fences repaired, cattle healthy, crops growing strong. But more than that, it was home to a love she'd never expected to find. "Ready?" Jake asked, coming up behind her. Alina turned to face the man who'd become her partner in every sense of the word. "Ready?" Jake dropped to one knee, pulling out a ring box. "Alina Vasquez, you've been my partner in business, in love, and in life. Will you be my partner in marriage?" Alina's answer was a kiss that tasted like forever, like home, like the promise of all the tomorrows they'd built together. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. "Yes, to everything." As they held each other in the golden light of the setting sun, Alina reflected on the journey that had brought them here. It had started with bleeding hands and desperate determination, but it had led to something beautiful, love strong enough to weather any storm, a family that had welcomed a stranger as one of their own, and a future bright with possibility. The ranch was saved. The family was whole, and Alina had found something she'd never dared to hope for, a love that would last a lifetime in the distance. Her father called them in for dinner, her mother's voice joining his as they welcomed Jake home. Alina took her fiancé's hand, and together they walked toward the house where their new life was waiting. The tools were put away, the work was done, and the bleeding hands had healed. In their place was something infinitely more precious, a love that had grown from partnership into something unbreakable. A future built on the foundation of trust and determination, and the knowledge that together they could overcome anything. As Alina had learned, sometimes the greatest love stories begin with the simplest gesture, man taking tools from a woman's bleeding hands, and choosing to heal what was broken rather than walking away. Sometimes salvation comes not from giving up, but from finding someone willing to fight beside you for what matters most. And sometimes, just sometimes, love really is enough.